Welcome to another episode of the Patient Convert podcast. This is a great topic because Justin and I get these questions all the time when it comes to the dreaded negative review, and doctors always want to know what they can do about it. So today in this episode, we are going to tell you how to remove a negative review. Yes, we're finally going to talk about it and a little bit about HIPAA compliance, but today's episode is all about what you can do to remove those negative reviews.
On your Google My Business, yes, which is, as you mentioned, probably one of the more common questions that we get that I know practices consistently can struggle with, especially when most negative reviews have very little to do with actual patient care and like a misunderstanding of insurance or something else that can sometimes be kind of irrational and have really nothing to do with the actual practice. So I really wanted to, there's some new exciting updates that we're going to talk about today, something that's just happened within the last 2 or 3 weeks in terms of Google My Business. So we just wanted to, let's go ahead and get started. Kelly, why don't you tell people that are listening today, there's been several ways, I think, historically to remove a review. So why don't you go over kind of what a couple of those options that exist today, and then I'll talk a little bit about this new big update.
So you can remove a negative Google review. So traditionally, these were the options or are the options. And one of them is if the content is completely inappropriate or inflammatory, you can flag it that way with the Google My Business team.
Yeah, and how you do that is you actually just navigate your way inside of your Google My Business, and we'll hyperlink a couple of these different things inside of the show notes. But if you make your way to the review, you'll actually see 3 little dots on the side, and you can click it and it'll say flag as inappropriate. So that's kind of a step one, the most kind of obvious and easiest way to flag it for a potential removal.
So you can do that. And another way is you can address the customer's issue. They may edit or remove the review. So a lot of physicians handle it this way. I tend to think this is one of the most common ways, don't you, Justin?
And that's obviously the most tried and true way, is just to go directly to the patient and try to resolve it. Talking to that really quick, we've done an episode or 2 on this, so go back and listen. It's one of our early on episodes about Google reviews and HIPAA compliance. But be very careful when a negative review comes in. What I generally recommend, because HIPAA compliance can become a pretty big issue if you get into a back and forth dialogue on a public forum like Google reviews, is take it offline immediately, as in reach out to the patient directly, call them, email them. And a lot of times, just that level of customer support, you usually can de-escalate the situation, solve the situation, learn from the situation, and then get the review removed. Again, sometimes, hypothetically, there's just irrationality behind it, so that may not be an option, but that is definitely the most common. And you'll say, well, of course, but a lot of people just don't go that route of trying to de-escalate. Yeah, but definitely remove it from Google in terms of the conversation that you have with them. Don't do it over a back and forth dialogue in the review.
Obviously, you never want to argue or dispute, and that's what Justin's talking about. And you also don't want to recognize the actual patient being in the office like a certain day or certain time or for a certain procedure on your end.
Yeah, for sure.
Which can be a little confusing, but just go back to that episode and we kind of walk you step by step on to make sure on a HIPAA compliance level when you're responding to these negative reviews to manage and handle that you are doing the right steps. So let's talk about, you can always tweet to Google Small Business Team as well. That's another great option that we've talked about with our physicians about removing negative reviews. And a great tool to use is...
Yes. So Google has multiple different Twitter handles, but there is one specifically for small businesses. And that is at Google Small Biz, B-I-Z. And again, we'll put that in the show notes, but that actually it's a proactive way to reach directly out to them if you're having difficulty. If you flagged it inappropriate, you've gone through a couple steps. There's 2 benefits: is direct communication with their support team over Twitter, and second, it's a public forum. So I think it kind of forces Google's hand to show good customer support and interact with you and try to resolve the issue. So there's a benefit there too, because it's kind of, you're handling it out in the open with Google. So I think that is another good way to go about potentially handling it in a proactive manner.
Yeah. And lastly, if the content is any kind of illegal or slanderous, you can submit a formal legal request to Google. And that is really important to know. We have experienced that actually with a client before. it was an IV clinic, and they were part of a larger franchise. And, due to some kind of relationship that we don't know too much about, but they separated from the franchise. So they were in a little bit of a legal battle, and they decided to retaliate.
Yeah, throw mud. Yeah, it got ugly, but that is when, again, in those situations, there are direct actions that you can take. We'll put the submit form again in the show notes, but that is definitely the highest level of escalation is if it's becoming a kind of a legal issue. There is a formal request that you can make to Google to get that taken down, which is a good thing to note.
So, there are 4 ways that we just talked about that you currently can use to remove these negative Google reviews. So don't feel like if it's on there's something you can do about it, especially number 4 that we talked about. You don't need to be afraid if somebody has never been a patient of yours or ever been in the office or saying something that is that damaging that you can't do anything about it. And now we have big news that we want to talk about. I'm going to let Justin really explain because this is more his cup of tea, but there's some big news, Justin. What is it?
So in the Google My Business world, this is probably, I would imagine, because I know it is from our end, on top of how many questions that we get, probably the most requested feature from Google is how do we take down reviews? Now, if you do think about it from Google's point of view, and I, again, talk to this dialogue a lot with clients or potential clients, is trying to make them understand why you can't just go and delete reviews on Google, is because they really want to protect the purity of the customer engagement and making sure it's real and authentic. And that's why you just can't go in and hit delete on a review, because Google wants user-generated content. That's why they're pushing reviews so much, is they want the user, or in this case, the patient, to drive the information that's online, the accuracy of the information. That's why you can report like information issues on Google My Businesses. It's why you can leave reviews, is they want that to be a major driver. So they're going to discourage altering reviews as much as possible to keep them very pure, very trustworthy, because they want everyone to believe and trust in the opinions they see on Google, that they're not fake, they're not altered, they're not anything like that. So I like to preface it as to why you may say, why doesn't Google just like have a delete button? Because if that started happening as a consumer, it would really lower the trust factor of the reviews you would see on Google, because you knew the business owners were just going in and removing anything that they thought was not making their reputation look really shiny. So know about that with a grain of salt. But to go to what the big news is, Google My Business has just released a review manager tool. And this is really big because it gives an actual area inside of Google My Business now to manage your review removal requests, the status of those removals, and really keep track of all of that. And it shows that Google My Business has heard small business owners and the issues that they're having with the review issue and the damage that it can have to their business. So they've created this tool, and again, we'll have a link to it, but I think it's a huge step forward because it puts small business owners a little bit more in the driver's seat of controlling, reporting negative reviews that are inappropriate or slanderous without having to chase Google around as much, and to know exactly where you stand on that and file formal appeals if the review removal is rejected. So you can see why it was, and then you can file a formal request to appeal that decision. There's still new things that we're learning about this tool. This tool is literally like 2 or 3 weeks old, so it's still in almost like a beta phase. But what you'll see when you go in is you'll actually, if you go to our show notes and you click on the manage tool, it's going to take you to your Google My Business, and you'll see a manage your reviews area, and you can choose the business, and then you can you can report new reviews to get taken down, and you can check the status of ones that you've previously reported. And it's going to give you a nice little kind of almost write-up preview of all of the most recent reviews that you have, which is really, really nice. One kind of interesting thing that we're not 100% sure why or why not, but it seems to, like, an agency like ourselves, or if you're a larger organization that has 75 Google My Business listings or 100 Google My Business listings or 1,000, we don't have access to the tool for some reason. Like if I try to pull it up, it says that based on the number of profiles that we have, this tool is not available for you. So that will probably have more insight on and more information as to why, but I think it's probably so it's not happening in bulk. But this is really pointed at small business owners that have a couple locations or have Google My Business that they manage, which again, for practices, I think is a really big step forward to being able to put yourself a little bit more in control over anything that's out there from a negative review standpoint that you believe is incorrect and should be removed. Again, just remember as to why Google doesn't have a delete button. I like to kind of stress that. So on the other side of it is the best way to get rid of negative reviews is by building positive ones. And also keep that in mind too, is I think a lot of people worry about, well, if I go out and I put a proactive reputation management process in place and proactively ask my patients to leave reviews, that I'm going to open myself up for negative reviews. What I always tell people is you hear that common saying of consumers, patients are 7 times more likely to leave a negative review. That is true. But when it comes to negative reviews, you don't have to ask people to leave those. If they're upset enough, they're going to go find your Google My Business or find your Facebook and they're going to complain. The problem is on the positive side, most people just simply need to be asked and asked in an easy way, as far as just like getting a text message or an email and clicking a link and leaving a review. But they're not, like people that are unhappy, going to proactively go out of their way most of the time and inconvenience themselves to leave a review. So what I say, looking at all of this at a high level, the best way to proactively push against negative reviews is by proactively building positive ones. And I would not be worried about the potential of a negative review, because you would be shocked. People are just as likely to leave positive reviews as they are negative, but only if you ask and you make it really easy for them to do so. So that is the thing that I want to leave with too, is we've got now a really great new solution for Google My Business to proactively manage negative review requests. We've talked about some other ways Kelly brought up about the kind of tried and true ways that have been around for a while to get a review removed. And again, we'll put some of this in our show notes. But lastly, the best way to defeat negative reviews is by building positive ones.
Absolutely. And we do that for many of our clients and we have great responses. So there's a lot you can do in controlling your reviews. So I don't want you guys out there to feel like this is out of your control or it's not important, because we've talked again about the importance of reviews. We're not going to go over that right now, but you do have control. This is all about an excellent patient experience, and you want to make sure your reputation reflects that.
100%.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, for another episode of the Patient Convert podcast.
Thank you for listening to today's latest episode of the Patient Convert podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and review on your favorite podcast platform. We are on Apple, iTunes, Google, Stitcher, and Spotify, or you can sign up to receive the latest episode via email. Just check it out on my agency website or my personal website. And if you are looking for more amazing healthcare marketing information or just to engage, check us out at entropy.com. And for any of my amazing physician liaisons out there interested in growing their physician referrals or learning the strategies that it takes to build highly engaged physician referral networks, check out my website, kellyknott.com, where I have free webinars, free downloads, and of course, my online physician liaison training course, Physician Liaison University. And as always, I'm a huge believer in connecting, engaging, and supporting one another. And the best way we can do that is networking. And I always connect with you guys on social media. And one of my biggest social media platforms is LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me there on LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter at Kelly Knott. And thank you guys again for listening to the Patient Convert podcast with your host, Kelly Knott.